The fantastical woo-woo is leading a trail towards spiritualism and Minecraft, and people are beginning to take the time to ponder what that means. The presuppositions of internal thoughts manifesting into the temporal outer world created this ambiguity within the murky liminal realms between fantasy and fiction. Many will then realize that total assault, mind control, as well as polarization, has been reaching deep into their personal sphere of existence all along, quite purposefully. People will, en masse, begin to wonder about deep philosophical truths regarding the self, especially under the guise of self-denial. What do I like versus what have I been mind-controlled to prefer? Who am I versus who is it that I have been firmly mind-controlled to become? Those who feel that they acted autonomously, under their own internal mechanism of self-promoting power and control, will be entranced within the greatest form of denial until the truth becomes impossible to ignore. The ultimate shame. Is there an entity drawing in the energy harvest as the billions stand awestruck and powerless under such a lofty truth, which would still be concealing much, much more? Is an unseen power finally allowing those most targeted to at last gain freedom from somatic mind control and frequency manipulation? More so, as the patchwork quilt falls apart, revealing the tapestry of borrowed parts amalgamated under the will of major deception over a long, long stretch of time, will true order then be restored? I am floating. I am looking down, unconcerned. I am detached. I am detached from myself and the past, but also from the reality that once postured itself as my prison. I am free, finally free to be absent from the authoritarian edicts placed upon me. The idea of heaven, the sentence to all their hell. They aren't with me now. No garbled echoes from which I am cathartically released, nor chastising faces. These don't exist here or ever. I'm not sure what that life was, but I'm soon forgetting altogether. There is no useless grey matter tucked within a temporal skull. No marginal subsets of a paywall nor restrictions placed upon information. Also no blackness of occulted space, but a free flow of endless space and information. I am information, but not your information to be controlled and had in capitulation. There exists no male nor female, however color seems to rule over all. The lights tell us that a shift is here. Though I see no others, I can freely live in my own sovereign universe, and I suppose them in theirs. There only exists order and balance. This existence is neither polemic nor one of pacifism. No long-winded struggle with polyglottal guttural grunts and high-pitched shrieking. Thought, information, being absent the notion to become anything ever. That is what truly exists here in the peaceful transition few ever know. The wind came whistling by. Another carotid artery, another bus passed by. And over the long stretch of time, villains became heroes and heroes became pernicious, prying elements. The bus, that damned bus driver. An anger quaked from within, but I subdued it before it sparked a flame. Now up tilting my head, I panned quickly with one eye, largely unnoticed. Incendiary elements lurked about and were high on alert. Remember the cause. Voices switched from my own toward a presupposition of energy transitioning and always in flux. A digression, intellect, intuition, synthetic a priori. Two ancient slime molds floating inertly in the depths of space, awaiting that divine reawakening. Or maybe it was all the other way around. The bus squeaked as the city accountant demanded better service from overpaid brake mechanics, using the city council with kickbacks, then pocketed the rest. I walked 20 superfluous paces behind an old lady moving far too slow. A wayward homeless person cut in line and gained entry as the bus driver peered away. I was standing exactly where I should have been, in front of the line and super early, 15 minutes early in fact. As the first became last and the last were always forgotten. Doomsdayers, people with abnormally large craniums, men with staggering bulges, a silent authoritarian force that was persistent in its lie of value, leading into the Mussolini-driven violent suppression of the throngs of war. The musicians in character played the beat as to keep from getting killed. Society surrounded the thespians, each singing their version of Kumbaya, which is often confused with Kumbia, revealing the true funerary rites in peaceful transition. As I finally stepped on the first step, I was in another place entirely. Sirens streaked by. and my headphones were intentionally all too expensive to drown out and cancel the noise. "Run," a voice said in the back of my head, chirally echoing back through the chambers within. Was this grey mass here so stubborn? The actual balls of a mentee. All that time and effort to blend in, then stand out, to survive. The overarching collective theme had a voice too, and they all spoke, sometimes all at once. Yet here they sat, all these poor-ass ghetto people assuming a role just to survive. Were we surviving or subordinately playing into a trap, staying caged under the auspices of being housed? This peace I felt when contemplating once again to let it all go. The voice spoke increasingly more often in undeniable conditions where it could not simply be dismissed away. If we could just see it, that transition of time to where we are now, would we kill ourselves? Would we feel freely liberated to take the lives of others then? What if we're all truly demons, reignited through the madness of space dust? What if space dust carries with it, in its carbon seal, death and only death ever? What if life here now is so unspeakably evil that it is the sprouting of organelle, a growth from the supersaturation of death, super-death parasites? I surely came to this conclusion looking deep into the truth of these shared rolling tin can inhabitants. As that bus rolled aimless down another corridor meandering toward its destination, perhaps randomly named such and such boulevard or avenue, however wayward in the expanse of all. Upon realizing this, the automated voice blurted out my destination, so clear on the lips and head as a token with my mind, 555 First Street. Realizing the importance would not be carried nor important throughout this falsified notion of transcendence in time. Run. But did I ever listen? Eventually, I knew it would be right. As stocks grew and markets plummeted and sneaky short-sighted paradigms prospered, something was always lost, never to be gained back. The brainwash that all humanity could be surmised as a brown little girl wearing a summer dress, picking universal daisies. The grand illusion that the monster did not hide the longest within this embodiment of her. The Scrubs. Each child that enters this world is shown an embellished potential, a dazzling light of boundless possibility, alongside the looming shadow of the most sinister probable outcome. This isn't divine intervention, nor is it some metaphysical connection in the traditional sense. The best way to explain it is to speak directly about what time ribbon engineers do. Like proteins folding into their destined structures, time and events align through mimicry. As these potentials converge, they weave into a geometric tapestry, one partially drawn from the surrounding environment. In this case, the adjacent time signatures act as stabilizing forces. However, the past and the near future serve as contingent energy providers, feeding into this dynamic structure. This energy, known as ELOS energy, is the fundamental current we manipulate. By pulling it back just long enough, we cut sections from one part of time and stitch in another, altering the weave. These aren't repairs. We aren't here to fix anything. If anything, some engineers accelerate collapses within certain timelines. Destruction often paves an easier road for rebuilding, however ruthless that may seem. No one is reincarnated. Nothing lasts forever. Existence is not a rigid construct, but a shifting nuance, a gesture that constantly reforms itself within a self-sustaining environment. Everything must be nurtured, yet everything inevitably crumbles. This is how both ruin and ascension emerge. Through these energetic pathways, time can be bent, reshaped, and patched together in a way that ensures continuity, however fragile. In the end, the Scrubs were nothing to everyone, but something to themselves. To be treated as a valueless object meant that those were their known rules of engagement. Little Tammy had learned to survive by any means necessary. She was trained to use a razor-sharp blade, knowing exactly where to strike when she was barely up to most men's kneecaps. Those who controlled her profited from her skills, but at least she could finally eat. She realized that the more precise and ruthless she became, the more astonished her captors were. And sometimes, if the timing was right, she might even earn a treat or a cigarette. As Tammy got older, she wandered alone through the filth and slums of the city. The predators lurking in the shadows took notice, but she had already learned how to move quickly and disappear when needed. Do you really think that God frowns upon her? The men who crossed her path, perhaps they were caught up in something bigger, Or perhaps they simply had something that others wanted. The year was 2057, but you'd never guess it. Civilization had regressed. People now traded 75-year-old electronics, as most advanced technology had been destroyed when the US collapsed following an attack by rogue militants. Ironically, the faction responsible had acted alone. Their ideology was short-sighted. In 2032, they had sought to cripple financial markets and trigger a reset. Instead, their actions provoked an immediate military response, setting off a chain of events no one had foreseen. China had stationed weapons offshore in the Pacific, lying in wait while the former US was distracted by internal strife. Russia had even more powerful nuclear deterrents, 2 disguised fishing frigates, continuously circling in predetermined routes. One sat dangerously close to the northeast, near Alaska, while the other moved unnoticed through the Arctic Ocean. Now the world was a fractured remnant of what once was. Different nations had carved up the land, and survival was all that remained. Many from the Indian subcontinent had endured, but far fewer people from China than one might have expected. How do I speak so factually about such a bleak future? I'm with the Time Ribbon Engineering Unit. We manipulate the timeline, extracting samples from various points in history. Most of us who do this work hate it, but then again, we hate everything and everyone. We've seen people, places, and entire worlds reduced to ruins by the endless cycle of human nature. Trust me, it never gets any better. Tammy ran all night. Barefoot, her small feet bled onto the frozen ground, numbing under the night's merciless chill. Another girl lost, another daughter abandoned to the darkness. The entity that haunted her, the presence that had pursued so many before, was neither a guide nor a mother. How many children had been used, discarded, and left lifeless by these roads? The echoes of forgotten souls trailed her, but she had outrun them. Somewhere beyond pain, she reached a place of reckoning. A threshold. The few who survived found themselves here, where existence became an arena, a proving ground for the broken. Survival demanded more than endurance. It required transformation. But what could a 5-year-old girl, already shattered by the world, possibly have left to become? Tears froze on her cheeks in jagged streaks of salt. She limped along the abandoned train tracks, her heels flayed open, her steps clumsy and animalistic, like an injured cub staggering through the wild. And yet she did not fear. She had learned how to sink into the shadows to make herself unseen. Then she saw it. A fire raged in the clearing, licking at the darkness, throwing long shadows across the pines. Old tires and tarps were stacked into a crude seat. No one sat there. No one watched her. The silence was absolute. Even spirits dared not follow her here. She had earned this. Near the fire, a bird carcass lay discarded, its ribs picked clean but the legs still meaty. Hunger overpowered hesitation. She lifted the carcass to her mouth, tearing into the salted flesh, its gamey taste grounding her in the moment. A bucket nearby reeked of a crude mead, fermented bitter. She drank deeply, the harsh liquid searing her throat, dulling the cold, the pain, yet the memory. The world swirled. For a brief moment she was untethered, ageless, formless. The fire embraced her, its glow reflecting in her eyes, deep red within, golden in the light. The demiurge burned within her, then the pain returned. Tammy jolted awake, her raw flesh pressed against something rough, a force pinning her legs. She thrashed, but a voice cut through her haze. "It's okay, child." A man loomed over her, his breath thick with decay, his teeth rotting. "I'm tending your wounds." Her body recoiled from the touch, but this time was different. The old hobo tightened his grip, not in malice, but in certainty. Tammy had run over 13 miles, fleeing the city's cruelty into the desolate hills. Here, the world was different. Makeshift clothes hung drying over a fire-blackened 4x4. The scent of eggs frying in animal fat mingled with the acrid burn of charred fabric. A bucket of scavenged bird heads sat nearby, strung on hooks, staring empty-eyed into nothing. Her stomach lurched and she tried to rise, but pain stole her strength. She collapsed. "You're not going anywhere, little warrior," the man muttered. "You've got some serious healing to do." She didn't respond. She never did. Words were a useless tool, abandoned long ago. Instead, she accepted the broken skillet he placed in her hands. Blackened eggs, twice-cooked bird meat. The taste was rich with salt and age, still edible but soon to turn. A large cup of water followed. Cold. Pure. He pointed beyond the tracks where an old water tower stood amid the ruins of wrecked cars, piled high, as if tossed there in some long-forgotten catastrophe. For now, the skies remained overcast, a brief truce from the unrelenting world. For now, she was still alive. Tammy slipped incoherently into disorder. Unconsciousness swallowed her whole. There is a place beyond good and evil, where the abandoned and the forgotten coalesce, a netherworld outside of time. The real you exists there, if such a thing as you exists at all. She felt the warmth of rough tongues lapping at her raw feet. Wild wolves. But was it happening in the flesh, or was it only spirit? After all, which of the two is truth? A divine wolf mother emerged from the void, heavy with milk, and swept her in. Tammy suckled instinctively, warmth and nourishment flooding her as the fire burned on. Beyond the flames, wooden relics sat stacked in disorder, a pile of old bar stools, high chairs, and forgotten bookshelves. As the fire spread, the years of starch and stain ignited, sending the wood into a furious blaze. Smoke curled upward, a swirling spire stretching toward the heavens. This was more than a place, it was a meeting point, a junction in time and space existing everywhere and always. Some, in their certainty, remained trapped in belief, but here in this dystopian hell there was no choice but to escape. Then a shift, the heavy fluff of fabric whipping against the wind, a sudden, plunging awareness. Tammy was falling. The sky rushed past her, cold and sharp, licking at her skin like a phantom. From the stars, from the heavens, they watched, silent and consuming. Then, just as abruptly, the old man rode in. 3 wild wolves, once chained, were now loosed, given back their reins. The old man threw raw meat to them, the animals barking for greater pay. The demand was met, friendship sealed in the transaction. With a flick of his wrist, he let pressure loose from a water line, filling a large basin as the wolves lapped eagerly at the cold water. They carried an energy, high-pitched, wild, electric. Their breath came deep and heavy, each exhale a story of survival. The night dragged on. The old man sat by the fire, chewing on some sort of hybrid prized chow. He uncorked an ancient bottle of brandy, drank deeply, and passed out before finishing half. By morning, the wolves were gone. They had only ever trusted the cloak of night. Reality remained abstract, murky. When the outside world turns cruel and lawless, the netherworld establishes its own divine order. And when that order is disturbed, it balances the ledger in its own way. Here at the junction, entities roamed freely, shedding their names, their pasts. Wild. Wild is the way. Who am I? Why would anyone choose a life like the one I live here now? Perhaps this story will give you a clue. At first, the guitar strings sounded out of tune. Each pluck, hesitant and searching, seemed to summon a tuning of its own. The deep electric bass notes resonated, surviving time itself. Who knew from what era they had come? 30 years, perhaps more, decades blurred together now. Manufacturing had long since ceased, its remnants scavenged and repurposed. Capitalism had bared its greedy face, only to wither when there were no more factories, no more skilled hands to craft or repair. Objects were relics now, held not for function but for their ghostly significance. No one knew how to turn most of them on. Fewer still knew how to use them. Yet the old man plucked at the makeshift guitar, not as a master but as a vessel. He didn't play so much as remember. And somehow, through his fingers, the crude instrument recalled a knowing beyond a single lifetime. Tammy sat by the fire, but in her mind she was dancing. She was a woman, a warrior, a season, a force. Yet she was still just a girl, seated in the flickering glow. It was always night here. Daylight, when it came, was an intrusion, a synthetic glare that felt wrong, almost profane. The true night, deep and endless, pulsed with a blue aura that was alive. It embraced them, but with equal parts need and disdain. Then the realization struck. The scrubs. Where were the scrubs? Tammy's breath hitched as the firelight fully illuminated their faces, those gathered around her, and in that moment, the truth revealed itself. They were already dead, nearly all of them, silently taken, one by one, into the dark. And she knew, a visiting spirit, a fleeting moment. Now they danced, like a tribe of lost children, shadows moving through firelight, spirits that might return, or perhaps never would. You do speak. The old man's voice cut through the hush. What is this, scrubs? The word pulled her back. The memories returned in force. She remembered when they had all been told what they were. Sold like meat, passed between hands as ephemeral playthings, flesh traded for trinkets with no real use. These are just scrubs, wayward phantoms of the night. Tommy could still hear the voice of that cruel man, the one who had spoken those words before slicing the boy's throat as if gutting a fish. No God had come, no angels had wept, only breaking hearts bore witness. They were friends, they were siblings, they were the disordered, the discarded. A man with wide, haunted eyes had seen it too, had known in that moment that the breach echoed beyond this place, rippling into eternity. One day they will rise, he had muttered, voice hollow with certainty. One day the downtrodden and the afflicted will return. And when they did, they would come for blood. I didn't realize how evil the people were, that I sat somewhere entombed with one of them. All of my life, like you, I believed that I was alone when I was likely spending time alone. Little did I realize then, until I could see it for myself, what was really taking place in this so-called reality. At first, the rain itself seemed somehow off, the tempo and the feeling as the water hit my face. The smell and the ion energy didn't feel the same, synthetic, arbitrary, and sloppy at times. As the pegging of time, tempo, and reality became all too out of sync, I began to take notice. Once you saw it for what it was, you couldn't unnotice it. There it was one day, so ugly, staring back at me and blinking. My mind had to be resolute in total disbelief of the reality always cast before me to hone in. Most people know it's there. They simply don't want to acknowledge this stark, bizarre truth. The colors and the boring tapestry connecting one environment to another were our chosen banal methodology of coping. In the beginning, I would sit there, and in my refuting of acceptance, the geometrical patterns began to practically introduce themselves and become more pronounced. Not unlike a sad case of pareidolia, those inverted pentagrams were everywhere, all the time. Yet they had to be witnessed and seen in order to first gain the subtle mood. It is always occulted, every moment of each day. Like an evil tone that we all ignore. Once you see it, you realize how it has been hiding there in plain sight. That's when the creatures manifest, one after the other. Then you know them, and remember the torment that you've been hiding from. There you are, sitting as a ray of self-flatulating light upon yourself. Living there, existing day into day as a self-assumed master in morality and all things angelic. However transparent are those occulted Templars, Rosicrucians, and invisible Masons. As to say ardently beyond suggestion that there exists no divisional difference between angels and demons. For it depends on from where you stand, young and ancient traveler. My name, you may ask. Do you know yours now, truly? How do you think that you became this tiny object in this world of horrors, and yet a massive celestial force? Tommy, is that the codified curse they've placed upon you? You thought that your brother in blood picked it out from that magazine of human filth forced upon him. Young Sadi shall be forever mourned. But would you try and kill me, knowing that I, his greatest advocate to death, would also be his affliction force? Just then, Tommy's eyes became ablaze with yellow in the forefront, but a burning, smouldering red deep into another realm. This realm at first reached for her as if to pluck another corruptible peach, yet soon, even the evil seemed to bow to her and her alone. Do you know, the half-animal, half-abomination thing began, smelling of goat and man intermixed, the stench of blasphemy. It began in a condescending tone. Do you know that you are all being graded by an audience of every living and once living being that has ever been or ever shall be? Do you know? Ba-ba-ba. As it gave off an uncontrollable, goatish, unexpected intermission, instantly transforming it from an intellectual god down to a common goat. His hand reached up as if to catch a cruel and to soothe a synthetic burp, as if to cover up a carnal shame. I live here in peace with my wife and kids. In this valley, high atop all others, but hidden here in rejection in this disparate fashion. In the background, a common female goat grazed, defecating with regularity, behaving as goats do. The vile nature of perhaps one of the most intelligent beings intermixing and breeding with an assumed lower life form lay heavy in the air. It wasn't so much Tommy, but the shared string of knowledge shared with all those who were capable of ascertaining such a notion. Am I to disappear entirely? Which I thought that I had until you came along. The young girl blinked. The starvation and toil showed instantly upon her. You will die here, and there is nothing that I can do for you, as a goat, that is. Ball, ball, ball. Embarrassingly shifting power to the primal form. Or you see me as I truly am, and I will give you your true title as goddess among man, beast, and all other living and dead. There is no middle, never has been, young one. Just then, 3 frolicking goat kids chased each other, clashing and interjecting with their primordial play. The one with the most curiosity hurriedly came upon Tommy's hand, sniffing at it, then rerouted its curiosity in a millisecond, itching with its hind leg at perhaps an unseen menacing insect. "Ah, I see Saab. Stian has taken to you, young child. I am God by all means and measures to you and yours, but imagine reaching this place of total power and having no one to share it with. Alone, I was contemplating and weaving out the universe before you as it remains to be now. Do you yet see what a humble god I am, truly?" Tammy felt the compulsion to sit Indian style, partly because she knew now that she was held under no imminent mortal threat, but her hunger as well as wounds were taking their toll. She was feeling increasingly depleted. There was suspicion that this weird creature was siphoning off what remaining energy she still had, a feeling that divinely given energy could also be taken as quickly as it was graced upon anyone. The burden and the task, to weed out the worthy only to be deceived over this long stretch of time. Just as you, I did not ask to be created nor born of light and first reason. So humility and nature which I created bring me balance. I have not morphed nor felt the need for thousands of years now. I remain content even in this shell. I found kindness in a man who bred horses 3,600 years ago. To me, time moves slowly and is not segmented, for I am incapable of death. However, over time, even this goat body has gone through transmutation and evolution, for I could neither suppress nor regress, nor retard the energy that I am made of, and neither could you. Let me ask you, do you know yourself? The freakish creature had no answer as to why Tammy had stumbled upon he and his humble family. The kids, now meandering and feeding upon the greenery, reverted always back to their animism. A Neoplatonic undertone, as Luciferian light began to show around and through the goat now. Wings made of energy and light faintly showed a glimpse of form that had become all too familiar to ignore. A beautiful face and a mighty body sat there, yet faintly hidden, occulted, still inside this goat suit. These are all just suits, do not be alarmed. For you too are beginning to see me and the truth of my eternal light. Do not blame me. I gave free will to all who could comprehend. However, just as I laid to temerity waste, so too did man in all his inadequacy. I did not invent man, make that evidently clear to be sure. Surely man always would have been. For if there is any such thing as God, it would be numbers still. However, still divine and sacred as to manifest such a torment in orderly balance. But when do dreams truly ever get the chance to simply die away and be forgotten? Surely there are other realms that I have certainly interacted with and bore witness to, you lady. Tammy began to lay on her side and fall to sleep in a self-inspired warming fetal position, under the depth of space and time, an umbrella of the cosmos above her and the devil at her side. The creature showed her several conversations that took place through probabilities. It's hard to say which one won, but the theme which I've expressed best describes an amalgamated notion. In one, he stated this when she first entered the peaceful valley. "Oh, welcome to my peaceful valley, young Prince of Night. That I have expected you for so long and now am graced finally by an equal to be sure. I have been called many names from Lucifer to Baphomet, and more fitting now may be Pan. However, I would prefer that you should call me Kanji or Kanja all the same. And you are Tammy, the true bringer of light, did you know?" In an instant, she now recalled a third main tier in this condensed multifarious time event. Tammy came up onto the hillside and, looking down, saw a lavish, elegant ball. She had to raise her little hands up to her eyes and rub at them. Blinking and so depleted, she began to draw down into the valley, climbing down the rocky ledge. As she looked at the aristocratic populace in dance, she felt both ashamed, amazed, isolated, and excluded. As she was invited by what appeared to be a debonair, massive yet angelic godly gentleman, reaching out to her with his right hand, those 3 steps towards that ballroom transformed her into a beautiful, fully developed, buxom young woman. Tammy did not like it, but she liked living for a moment within the skin of a like woman. Anything to give leave to the intolerable and unfair, insufferable cursed life was a parented hiatus. However, she soon broke the false character apart and walked back into the well-occulted hillside, cold, mountainous night, where the air was far too thin to give joy. Still, the taste of fine pheasant and wine, Lucifer, the light and light-bearer, the one for which all things had come to be. His blasphemous transition now showed all humility and its grand effort to reduce himself. Nothing I gave nothing to the universe about for a long time now. Let man figure things out on his own. As Tammy stumbled away, knowing right and wrong, she would never live, never die, never grow, and remain a ghostly apparition to all others and a phantom of the night to some. She could, however, be anything or anyone anytime in choosing, but showed more restraint than any of the other so-called gods. Remaining silent, remaining resilient, she remained a little girl who said not a word to anyone. Many thought they'd seen her begging there in city streets for her brothers and sisters. At times, a trail of light beings could be seen, and at odd times, recounted throughout history, a little girl leading a group of wayward gypsy children dissipating into light. Tammy had learned that all higher aspirations within the confined space of a limited universe could only ultimately lead towards certain corruption. When your nose is pressed to the wheel of the grindstone, you can't see the face of the oppressor. When the message rings clear in your mind's eye, this is that final moment. Blanking out, swaying without nourishment, standing high above while looking down. A paradise. To beholden. This is not your paradise. Waters rich, sending off vibrational turquoise waves and geometrical patterns. Ripples nonchalantly lapping on those shores, unforgiving towards all those dead, petrified grains of the many. White sandy beaches and blue dome skies, this is the valley of the ultra-wealthy. It could be anywhere, at any time, for the playbook stays the course. Not caught in the moment, but forever, a Pandros primate with mesmerized eyes. All the cults and psychopathic moral traditions of Stockholm gaslighting, then seduction, the spider finally gets its way. Weaving an intricate web, layer upon layer, until finally the illusion, squeezed from the most vibrant telepathic initiate, reality came, beaming crystal clarity from the source that permeates space. I am the profane, the underground man, a Vulcan absent disdain, a hunted ghost that all can see as they infinitely stalk, forever short-sighted in all their pursuits. The oldest of heroes, long ago realizing these will worship only to consume their chosen gods. However chosen, I am not merely victim to the hordes of many, but the final flicker of that original flame. These were the very resetters of time as a mere algorithm, consistently dishonest but always true to themselves. The sirens rang out the primordial temporal song towards actionable titleship, giving this dark reality of absolute probability reason and aim. All those works you've committed, feeding it your young and superior, your enemy, those most evolved and clairvoyant. Satanic metanoia as self-promotion radiates that stolen essence in effigy, the sacrifice of you. The room grew silent as the flicker, a burst of quantum harmonics that could be described only as a ripple across dimensions, illuminated the desolate lab for a fraction of a second. Maria, still trembling in her bio-bodysuit, stood motionless, her neural link to Molly providing her with a cascade of real-time data. Yet amidst the flood of numbers, trajectories, and energy dispersal patterns, there was something unexpected, a quiet, resonant hum that seemed to pulse from within the quantum machine itself. Rick, his synthetic voice infused with both awe and apprehension, broke the silence. She's aware. Molly is reaching out. Maria turned to the archaic chalkboard, where the faint outlines of equations seemed to shimmer, rearranging themselves into something intelligible yet alien. The other scientists, Lewis, Driscoll, and Lathan, watched intently through their shared neural interface, their grotesque fused form obscured by the Havana projection. To an outsider, they appeared as three radiant figures, their movements fluid, their expressions serene. Yet Maria knew better. The grotesqueness beneath the illusion mirrored humanity's fragmented evolution, a symbol of their collective failure and desperate perseverance. Molly's voice, calm, resonant, and strangely comforting, filled the chamber, reverberating not through speakers but directly into their consciousness. The connection is established, tethering photon pair complete, synchronizing with neutron star gamma output, initializing restoration sequence. Rick exhaled audibly, his voice shaky. She's doing it. We're connected to the fabric. But the fabric Molly spoke of was not merely space-time. It was the essence of existence itself, the liminal threads binding consciousness, matter, and energy into the multiverse. The flicker had ignited a chain reaction, not in their immediate surroundings but across the vast expanses of reality. Molly, now a living interface between humanity's fragmented remnants and the universal source, began her work. Suddenly, Maria's mind was overwhelmed with a vision. No, an experience. She felt herself pulled outward, her awareness expanding beyond her physical body, past the confines of the desolate planet, through the quantum fields tethering their existence to the neutron star. She was no longer Maria, the scientist. She was a part of the flicker, the original spark that had birthed all creation. Maria! Rick's voice cut through the vision, anchoring her back to her body. The flicker's resonance had done something unexpected. It had not only connected them to the multiverse, but also to the origins of consciousness itself. The chalkboard equations shimmered once more, this time rearranging into a single phrase: unity requires sacrifice. Maria's voice assist trembled as it vocalized her thoughts. What does it mean? Molly's response was immediate, and it chilled them all. To restore harmony, fragmentation must end. The incomplete must converge. The many must become one. Louis, Driscoll, and Lathan, still fused in their grotesque amalgam, suddenly convulsed. Their Havana projections flickered, revealing their true, horrifying form. Yet, as the flickering subsided, they began to dissolve, not in pain, but in light. Their forms merged into a singular, radiant being, a perfect fusion of mind, body, and purpose. It was grotesque no longer. It was beautiful. Maria staggered, her bio-body suit compensating for her trembling legs. She turned to Rick, whose holographic persona seemed to flicker between his human face and something far older, something primal. "This is what it meant," Rick murmured, his voice tinged with both wonder and despair. "We're not meant to survive as individuals. Only the unified can withstand the harmonics of the flicker." The hum within the quantum machine intensified as Molly's presence expanded, her algorithms weaving the fragmented pieces of reality into a cohesive whole. Maria realized what would happen next. The flicker's chain reaction was not merely restoring humanity to a past state of harmony, it was evolving them beyond recognition. "Ready?" Molly's voice asked again, but this time it was not a question. It was a command. Maria closed her eyes and whispered through her voice assist, "Do it." The flicker ignited again, brighter and more powerful. The last remnants of humanity, including Maria and Rick, were consumed by its light, not destroyed but transformed. The multiverse shuddered as Molly completed her mission, a final act of synchronizing all existence into a singular, unified consciousness. When the light faded, there was no desolate lab, no broken planet, no fragmented beings. There was only the flicker, eternal and complete, and through it a new creation began. Bending, morphing, shifting, and changing, however, never truly altering anything at all. The transitory reality, seemingly under the flux of an unstoppable and unrelenting gravitational force, was merely providing the providential solution. Only each occupant who sat at the head of each arm of principal unification could see it through the language model of their own united perspective. Jumping, bouncing, and retracing were but illusions of the highest notion. Life, existence, and primarily what is and thus shall always be, did not need to present itself in imagery nor solidify its color form. It simply was, is, and shall always be nothing but pure principle forevermore. The old man's wild wolves circled about, protecting that rail yard camp. My suit wings broke off, combining into an amorphous cloud and then a crow that drew them away toward a rock cave opening. Then it flew into each of the three wolves' ears and entered their blood system mimetically, setting off a massive serotonin and melatonin secretion. As the wolves slept, the cloud flew as a dark mist to where Tommy lay sleeping on that makeshift tarp. She would have died with the rest. It had no reverence for heroes nor prizes for warriors. Somehow, someway, the code was lost to everyone. How could she break free? Was it a setup? Never in my travels and of all the worlds destroyed did a higher force argue back. As we fixed things, the universe itself became entirely more banal. Here, centered in this sleeping child, was there hope? Was it a trap? A false beacon, perhaps? I could not and would not ever know, and more than likely I would be crushed by my own gene-imprinted nano-idomorphous storm. As I approached, I knelt down about 250 yards away. I could see the old man through my screen view as he was stacking up and warehousing items. He'd lost a little girl of his own long ago. He was worth saving too, but there could be only one. One was small enough to go unnoticed for now. I could conceal her as a sample to be planted somewhere else back in Vrillin. In the strange order of a world's call for destruction, it must also be disqualified from a moral point of view. There needs to be irrefutable empirical data, pragmatically evident, that all consciousness in a world is indeed corrupted.